Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to call to order the Communications Committee meeting. It is September 8th. It's roughly 9:02 a.m. Let's see where we get started. So first order of business is approval of the May 2023 meeting minutes. Can I get a motion?
I move to approve the May 2023 meeting minutes for the Communications Committee.
Excellent. I will second that. And we will move on. All right, so we actually have a pretty light agenda. The item on our agenda is Board of Education public comment process. This came out of partially the workshop that we had back a couple of weeks ago, and also just something I think as a communication committee, even before Chad was a member, we sort of kicked around like, what is the purpose of public comment? How do we engage with the community? And most importantly, I think when we want public comment, but what are the parameters in which we interact with the community during public comment? So Chad brought this up at the workshop again. I know that we as a communication committee have done some work at this, and we actually made a lot of progress, really, if you think about it, because when we first started meeting, it was during COVID, and there was a lot of uncertainty about what public comment is, when can you make public comment, and so forth. And we really went out there and invited people to make public comment. We went, I think, above and beyond as far as our ability to disseminate when our meetings are, asking people to comment, and so forth. So Chad, I think, has some ideas on how we can take what we've done so far for a public comment and expand on it. So Chad, wanna?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. So just because I think it's always easier to react to something than nothing, and it's always easier to start somewhere than nowhere, I took the liberty of writing out an initial version of an example of if we do proceed with this, what we could use or what we could say. A couple caveats about it at the beginning. I actually asked ChatGPT to do this same exercise, although I swear on my heart and soul, none of what you're about to see was written by ChatGPT. And in fact, what it came up with was not actually that great. It was pretty generic. But I wanted to do it because I do think as a board, especially, and I'll speak for myself, especially given the sort of like dinosaurs that we are in comparison to our kids, it's important that we're always becoming, as aware as we can be of the forces that are enacting on their life. And I think large language models and other AI are certainly going to be one of those things. So as long as we're talking about language, I thought it was an interesting exercise to look at. But nothing you're seeing now has anything to do with ChatGPT. I just think it's an interesting thing for us all to be aware of as Board of Ed members. A couple other caveats. Writing is rewriting. So this is too long. It's too wordy. It might be too formal, all sorts of things like that. And I have very, very thick skin about this sort of thing. So you can beat it up entirely. And if we decide to scrap it, start over, or do something different, we can. Okay, enough caveats.
Maybe let me just say one quick thing. So
yes.
What I forgot to say was from the workshop, what we left with was essentially a discussion that we would have in communication, which helped to inform the public that we want public comment, we invite public comment, but there are parameters in which we operate as a board, so that when people make public comment, we're prepared to respond. And we're prepared to respond, not always, more often than not in real time. So the purpose of what we're getting started with the framework on is we want public comment, we invite public comment, but what are the processes for the Board of Ed? It's not processes for the community. This is more Board of Ed processes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. I skipped just a couple steps there, so let me back up. I think the first order of business would be, do we want to say something like this at each meeting? The second order of business is like, if we do, what are the sort of core messages? And then the third order of business would be, this is an example of what we could say if we choose to say something like this, to do what you're talking about, David. I jumped ahead of step 3 just because I thought that would be the easiest way to make this efficient for everybody. But I'll show this bit of text I've written, and then let's certainly not skip a step, and let's begin with a discussion of like, do we want to do this in the first place? So with that, is it okay if I now share the text of the thing that I wrote up quickly? Does that work? Yeah? Okay. So let me know in a second if you can see my, let's do that. Let me know. Oh, hang on a second. I have to do it with my whole screen. Entire screen. Dan, maybe you can tell me why Google Chrome gives you can't share your screen. Google Chrome might not have screen recording permission on your computer. Go to System Preferences for more help. Go to Issues Presenting. All right. So I don't want to take all the time to do that. What I'm going to do instead is just put the text into the chat feed. It's pretty lengthy, but then we can at least all look at it. Alternatively, Dan, I could zip it to you quickly in an email.
Yeah, you want to yeah, because I think if you put it in the chat, people who might be viewing now or in the future won't be able to see it.
Well, how about if I make him a co-host? Would that enable him to share?
Try making chat a co-host.
Yeah.
If that help.
All right, hold on.
Because what you're in chat, when you click on screen share, it should allow you to do a tab, a window, or the entire screen.
Yeah, and I selected all those, but it was blocking me from doing it because actually it's on my computers and I haven't enabled screen recording permission on my computer in System Preferences. So I think
I have a Mac.
Yeah, so I'd have to accept that, log out, whatever. I think it might be faster just to send it to you, Dan. Is that okay?
Yeah, send it to me. Send it to me. Yeah.
Okay, let's do that. So, okay. Forms for communicating. Okay. It is away to you, Dan. And then once you get it, if you can share it on the screen, that would be great.
You got it. You got it. One moment. Okay. So.
And then once you pull it out, I'll just read it out loud. That's kind of an important point, only because you have to remember that we'll be saying this out loud as opposed to submitting it to people as a written document. And then we can rip it apart. But actually, more than that, step back and decide or talk about if we even want to consider doing this, and therefore escalating it to a full board meeting to consider if we want to add this in the beginning of public comment as an introduction. Let me know when you have it. Oh, there we go. Okay, can you zoom in a little bit, Dan?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Let me see if there's a way to do that. Hold on.
Yeah, my eyes aren't quite there.
All right, hang on a second, guys. You know what? I'm gonna put this in Word. That way I can do that.
So while we're doing this, getting back to point one, do we want to say something? I think that the general consensus during the workshop was that we should discuss it. I personally think that it is not a bad idea just to have something said at the beginning of public comment, just primarily because we don't want to have people go to public comment and then feel not heard or dissatisfied with the lack of response. So I think it's kind of important to communicate that. So I personally feel that having a statement like this is a good idea. And also just to let them know, exactly what it is that that we are able to do. That being said, I just saw it's 3-4 paragraphs, and it's definitely too wordy. Don't be.
Yeah, well, hang on, wait, before we let me read the thing first, because yes, like as rewriting, and the reason I went to drafting as opposed to something else is that this is not an entire chapter we're writing. It's just a few paragraphs. So it was quicker to do this than to theorize about it. So anyway, this is the bad first version. At each public meeting, we share this purpose and process statement about public comment to help public comment be as productive as possible and give context and explanation as to why the rules and protocols are as they are. These practices are typical of other educational boards around the United States and are important to reiterate to remind citizens of the board's role. They're a body of oversight. Our job is not to craft or create district policy. Our job is to evaluate how well the board executes its own. Board of Ed members don't engage in individual public comment.
That's not true. We create policy.
Yeah, but hold on. Sharon, if you could mute yourself because there's background noise coming from you. Chad, if you could slow it down, but that's the whole purpose of what we're looking at now is this is just a draft, right? So this is what Chad's understanding is. So I keep going, and then we will look at yeah.
Sure. Yeah, and even look, as I read it out loud, I think probably an easy fix maybe just cut the whole first paragraph. But let's look at it as a jumping off point to foster discussion, and then we'll go from there. So Board of Ed members don't engage with individual public comment for a variety of reasons. Prioritizing one comment versus others is inequitable. Topics often need further research and consideration. Agendas of a given meeting need to be solidified in advance and honored. For these reasons and more, please do not expect the board to respond to, discuss, or vote on any given item of public comment. This does not mean, however, that your public comments are not heard, considered, and valued. Our role in Weston is to serve the school district and the community, and understanding the opinions and concerns of the public are vital in that service. Comments are limited to 5 minutes per speaker. In addition to public comment, you can also make your concerns and opinions known to the board via written communication. As with public comment, the board may not necessarily be able to address individual emails, but please know that all emails are read and directed to the appropriate audience, be that the Board of Education, the superintendent, or other. So that's the first bad draft. As I'm reading it out loud, I think actually we just cut the whole first paragraph and just jump right into Board of Ed members don't engage. But I'm way ahead of things. Let's first consider, do we want to share something like this at the beginning of public comment?
Well, I personally think
my vote is that I agree with you. I think we should. So that's my vote. But
yeah,
I want to, others.
I think, yeah. And I think, and Sharon, you can kind of give us your thoughts, but I think, Sharon and I have been on communication now for a few years. And this has been an area that I think Sharon would probably agree. It's been a passion of mine to really sort of address. There's what I always refer to as, there's the appearance of how the board operates, and then there is the reality. And if there's a disconnect, we need to fix that, right? And I think that over the past couple of years, we've done a lot to fix the appearance that for example, our meetings are in, dark alleys in other towns, right? We fixed that. I believe anyway, we've done a good job at fixing that perception by disseminating when meetings are, recording them, broadcasting them. So at this point, I think the intent here is to let the community know why, when they make public comment, we don't get into a interactive discussion, because I know, depending on the topic, in some cases it's pretty emotional for the community when they come, and they're looking for something, right? Even we're 7 people, 7 families, potentially 7 different sets of kids, 7 different life experiences, but when they come, we look like we're playing poker. So I think the intent here is to let people know before they make public comment how the board operates, so that we don't set up disappointment when someone speaks passionately or emotionally on a topic and they're looking for something from us. And then conversely, we do want to figure out what are the parameters. Like, if the Board of Ed at public during these meetings only speaks by way of the chair, and we have to suss that piece out as well, then we should find out what are Steve's capabilities to at least acknowledge, thank the commenter. Can we, when a public comment comes up, I believe if we are unclear on something on the public comment, if somebody says, for example, such and such book was removed by the curriculum committee last year, we as a board may not know that, but Bernie, as chair of curriculum, may have awareness of that. So is she able to, at that point, say to the person, oh yes, this was removed from curriculum in spring of 2022. We will take this back to the full board and come back to you. So, like, how can we acknowledge people and not get into a full-blown conversation when some other Board of Ed members may not have the knowledge to engage in a conversation?
I think it's dangerous to open up the public comment to a response, and for just the reasons that you mentioned here. And if we have some members that are in the know, other members that aren't, I think it's something that needs to be discussed amongst the board before any public comment is responded to. So I agree. I want transparency. I want them to understand. I want people to comment Because if they don't comment, we don't know what their concerns are. But once we know what their concerns are, we can consider it, and we can either add it to the agenda, or it can be directed to the appropriate person who can then reach out to them and respond, in their capacity. But we as board members, I think it opens a dangerous precedence for us to start responding to people at meetings. So I think we just need to have, and I think Steve is very capable, but I think Steve also understands the inherent dangers of choosing topics to respond to and others not. Because if he responds to one, to your point in the second paragraph, but doesn't respond to someone else, then, again, most of these comments are emotional, and there's going to be, it can become heated, and we don't want that to happen. We want these meetings to be civil. So I think putting out there a very simple statement of, we want and appreciate all the public feedback. We hear you. As a policy, we are not able to respond to the public comment. But that doesn't mean that we're not taking your comments into consideration. And that doesn't mean that we won't have someone from the administration respond to your comment at a later date. But, we do not, thank you so much for bringing your concerns to the board, but we cannot respond to your comments. I think that we.
But how do you address? So if and Chad, and you should jump in, but let me ask this question. So how do you engage with the community if they're making public comment and we don't offer them what is the next step at minimum? So for example, to your point and to Chad's draft, there are matters that are not Board of Ed matters. They're actually superintendent matters. It might be principal matters. It might be HR matters, right? And the Board of Ed doesn't get involved with those. Then there might be matters that the Board of Ed is considering. And so the public comment should inform us during our considerations. And we would use that information later on in the meeting if it were an agenda item, or we would come back to another meeting in the future with that information. What prevents the chair or member of the board to, when a person makes a public comment, to let them know what the next step is? So if a parent comes in and says, I'm just making this up, my child's been having a problem at lunch. They can't get to, by the time they get their lunch and they sit down 5 minutes later, lunch is over, right? Well, that's clearly not a Board of Ed issue. That's a building issue. We should, I would say that we should have the ability to say to the parent, thank you. That's actually an issue the Board of Ed doesn't address. That's an issue that, making it up, Patty Falber should be addressing for you. Do you have her information? So when we get the public comment, we can let the person know what is the next step. It could be a Board of Ed issue.
We can say, keep in mind when these comments and these public comments are made, the superintendent and all of the school principals are there, as well as the director of people services, et cetera. So, and operations, IT, everyone, all the department heads are at these board meetings. And so we can have public comment in which, somebody says something along those lines, and we can say, thank you so much for sharing that concern with us. We'll perhaps Patty, if it's, WIS or perhaps Patty can follow up with you later. Something along those lines. There's no problem with that. But I think that you're going to get a lot of pushback from the other board members on engaging in conversation. And that's what I think we're trying to be careful, because we don't want, these board meetings are long. We have a lot of business to cover. And if we start engaging in back and forth during the public comment, it's going to take forever. And, there's no guarantee that people are going to be leaving any happier than when they came in. As a matter of fact, they might leave even angrier when they find out that what they're asking for is just not possible. And so
what happens?
Let me go jump in for a second. So, my thought was part of what we covered in the orientation workshop, or what did we call it 2 weeks ago? I guess workshop.
It was a workshop.
We called it a retreat to the portable classroom. The definition doesn't work well.
If you remember, for like a half an hour, I was pushing on this topic. about like how do we engage in the robust debate that council was suggesting that is an important part of this. And what we came to, if you remember, was that happens in committee. Committee meetings should encourage and foster discussion and debate and discourse.
Yeah.
And if you're not on that committee, you should attend the other committees if you want to, and you can participate as public. But that has to happen. Otherwise, how do we make any sort of progress on these things? And public comment in the larger board meetings is not the appropriate place to do so. Now, if that is in fact, that's what council suggested. If that's sort of standard protocol, then I completely agree with David that we need to let the public know that we cannot be responsive to you in this format, but we are responsive to you. And I think you're saying the same thing, actually, Sharon, but perhaps in a different approach to it. So if we would take that suggestion about who we hand it off to, as an example, I've only been on the board for a year, but I've never, ever seen anyone pipe up real time and say like, oh, who can address that for you eventually is such and such. Public comment is literally just like the head nodding, sort of like passive digestion of what people have said. So
But
to your
Chad,
point,
every
go ahead.
comment that's been at the board that since you've been there, every comment has been directed at arming Mr. Fisher in school security. And that is a really hot topic for us to
No, that's not true. There were other ones about there was a variety of topics, but not everything under the sun. But I'm glad you brought that up, actually, because that discussion was part of what made this feel slightly urgent to me, because I think where we fell down, from my perspective anyway, last year, was that there was a first meeting. In the second meeting, we were not clear as a body about like, this is in process. We're working on this. These are the reasons we can't make an immediate vote on this, nor can we sort of share what is the latest and greatest. This will be a multi-month process. Please have patience and please go into this with that expectation. We never said that. So what the public received was like meeting 1, lots of comments about it. Meeting 2, total silence from the board, even though that had dominated public comment the previous meeting. So that's the thing that I think we could do a much better job of doing. 1, in committee, having robust discussion and dialogue. 2, in larger board meetings, the full board meetings, some sort of statement of like why we don't respond in public discourse. Maybe outlining the rare times that we do, like if there's a clear line of communication that should be handed off to Patty or someone else. And then number 3, at board meetings, we should take a much more active role, I think, in letting people know about what is going to be discussed or where things are in process, so they have a sense that things are not just falling into a vacuum. That's at least what I took away from the retreat, but I might be alone in some of those conclusions.
I don't recall the part where we were saying that we were going to be giving status updates on public comment. I don't disagree that we need to say.
No, you're right. We didn't arrive at that. That's me saying that's my own editorial comment about last year's school violence discussion, my own perception of where we fell short because we never really let the public know that this thing is in process and you have to have some patience with it.
Yeah, I'll just quickly jump in and say, some of the feedback that we got during that first meeting that Chad referenced with school security was, well, when am I going to hear from you? What is the next action? How do I get this on the agenda? And for the most part, we stood there poker face. And so I think what Chad's saying is, do we owe it to the public that when they come to these meetings, and I think there are going to be topics that right at public comment, and we don't get a lot of public comment unless it is a topic that's very timely, right? Something has happened locally or in the nation. We don't get a lot of public comment otherwise. But when we get public comment, it's generally going to fall into, can we take this item, such as my child's having an issue in the lunch at WIS. Can we say to the person at that moment in real time, Patty is here, Patty's, we can come up with a policy that if there's an issue that is a school-based issue, because we have the administrators there and other people there, they just simply acknowledge the speaker and say, thank you, I have your information, I'll be back in touch with you. so that the person who's made the comment knows, okay, it's not a Board of Ed issue. It's going to be handled at the school level. And then for issues that are Board of Ed level, I think what Chad might be saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, when we meet again, so people make this public comment, they've left they've made their public comment, they have left the microphone. They don't know when, if, or how they'll ever hear from us, but they've generally asked us something that's actionable. Do we, at the next Board of Ed meeting, either discuss the item or close the loop on the item, such as at the last Board of Ed meeting, Chad Hopner stood up. He spoke about his concerns that the doors don't properly latch at, Hurlbut Intermediate School, making the school up for Hurlbut Intermediate School. And we just simply say, we had a conversation with school personnel. That issue has been addressed. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. I think maybe, Chad, is that what you're sort of, yeah.
How do we put that
Let
on
me
the
jump in.
agenda? Is that like response from last month's public comment section? I mean, how are we gonna, and not for nothing, I think that we did address the issues that were brought up during public comment. We didn't address them at the next meeting, but there were numerous communications from the administration going out to all of the parents within the district, and the people who were at the school board meeting who were speaking were all parents. So there were numerous communications from Lisa talking about increased security measures that we were taking. So I think that we did actually communicate to them that we heard them. They came back because they didn't get the answers that they wanted, but that doesn't necessarily mean that, just, saying something in a public comment, it does not necessarily mean you're going to get it, right?
To jump in for a second. So David, I think those are examples of times we should not respond immediately. Meaning if someone says, when is this going to be on the agenda? I think if we respond right there, we can't possibly give an accurate answer that doesn't risk putting us in a problematic position. Or like, when am I going to hear about this? Those are all examples of things I don't actually think we could answer real time. But Sharon, to your point about, we didn't really answer the public. Lisa sent stuff out, but we never said, essentially, hey, everyone, please, the school district is working on this. Please wait, you will be hearing from the superintendent shortly. And if you remember, we got a lot of email communication that actually did not get any responses for a while, which was part of why in the next meeting, people showed up agitated about like, look, I've emailed, I've done these, I haven't heard anything. So I think both things here are my own, how I would come down on this would be, I don't think we should respond back in public comment. I think we should give a very clear reason and outline why we don't, and what people can do to get things on an agenda or to move things along, including written communication. Then maybe if there are some very particular carve-outs, like if it is absolutely clear to the chair or to Lisa or to someone of like whose sort of arena that would fall into, they can respond real time and say, we can hand it off to so-and-so. Maybe that's something we would decide. But then the flip side is I do think we have to do a much better job in when there is robust public comment, letting people know in advance of the next meeting or at the beginning of the next meeting what balls are in motion about it. Because I don't think we did that at the meeting. In fact, Sharon, if you remember, I think you jumped in and did a really good job, actually, kind of real time consolidating this for people, because there really was an absence of messaging. And based on what we just went through with the retreat, that wasn't necessarily the best way to do it. But I thought you did a great job because there was a vacuum about what was happening in that moment. The miss here too is that I think the school's done a great job, actually. If you look at the way they've leveraged community resources, the measures that have been done, we went ahead and fast-tracked a bunch of funding to make the suggestions that our local law enforcement professionals thought were smart. I think that happened pretty darn quick, actually, over the summer, rather efficiently. But we did not communicate about that in a way that I think inspired trust in the public in the spring.
I think just to segue or to expand on that, I was not implying that we would get into real-time responses during public comment. I agree with you, and that's sort of what we're working out here. Like, what can we do as a board, right? So, as a committee, I think if we kind of break it into pieces, when people make public comment, and the public comment clearly falls on somebody other than the Board of Ed. So it's clearly a superintendent issue. It's clearly a
Mhm.
building administrator issue. I think the first takeaway is, can we ask whether or not during public comment, when they say something such as, my child's having a problem in the lunchroom and my child's at WIS, Patty Falber is present, can we right then and there at least close the loop on that piece of public comment by letting Patty Falber say to the parent, I have your information, or I will ask my assistant to get your information. Thank you. Right? Now, I think at that point, that loop has been closed, unless, of course, Patty, the problem is not resolved and the parent comes back and says, I really need further interaction, at which case it actually would go to the superintendent. So I think the first question is, when people make public comment, if it's not a board issue, which the vast majority are not, right? Basically what Jessica has told the Board of Ed is the vast majority that we are solely an oversight board and we don't make decisions. Although we vote, so I'm not quite sure how you decide.
No, she said we don't make decisions away from or we don't make decisions away from the table.
Okay, so so public comment. If the person making public comment, they're addressing the Board of Ed. If we in real time can let that parent, community member know this is a school issue, a superintendent issue, we should, I think, put that into our process for public comment. So if you come for public comment, and it's something that's not a Board of Ed matter, but it is a matter to be resolved by somebody present, that person will take the information, let you know that they have your information, and they will take care of follow-up. So I think that could be the first potential process or policy change as far as public comment goes. The second one is—
Or question at least if we should do it. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, what was it, Chad?
I was just saying, or at least a question of should we do that? Meaning we should examine, can we put in some sort of like process where things can be delegated real time? We can examine that as an idea.
Right, exactly. I think that's the number one, right? In a scenario like that, in real time, can Patty Falber, who's present at the Board of Ed meeting, who would otherwise be asked to, resolve the issue, can she just simply say to that parent, thank you, Ms. Ferraro, I have your information. I will get in touch, give me a day or two and I'll get back in touch with you. And then I think from Board of Ed group, that issue has been closed out. We know that Patty's going to take care of it. And we can presume that unless the parent says, Patty didn't take care of it, it's a closed matter.
You know what? I think rather than pointing at the administrator that's within the room and saying, Patty will get back to you, or Phil will get back to you about that busing situation, I think what we need to say as a board is, thank you so much for your feedback. That's not really something that the Board of Ed deals with specifically, but we will redirect it to the person who will be responding to you. So we'll make sure someone follows up with you. We can say that without putting pressure on the principals and the admins in the room to specifically, get back to them. I think that's, they're there. It's been a long day. I don't think putting them under the spotlight is what they're going to appreciate it. I think just saying, you know what, thank you for your public comment. We appreciate, and we will direct it towards the appropriate people.
I'm sorry. I just want to jump in here all just as like an outside looking in on this and kind of to play devil's advocate just a little bit, if you guys don't mind, so I can, poke holes in this and everything can get shored up properly. But I agree with Sharon. I don't think calling out somebody by name at a meeting and saying, all right, Dan DeVito is going to take care of this. And also because let's say Patty, right? We use Patty. Let's say it falls under the purview of WIS, but maybe it's not Patty, maybe it's Leslie, the assistant principal, or do you know what I'm saying? So if we could not call by name, I think that would be a better option.
Yeah, let's get a little more systematic about this. There's some step-by-steps here. One, we have to decide, do we want to have within this as one carve out that if it's absolutely clear that it's not a Board of Ed matter, that in public comment we will let the public know that. That's the first thing, deciding, do we even want to do that? If we do, then I think you could have two options, which I think would both avoid exactly what you're talking about, Dan. I agree. That's like throwing people under the bus. Like, Dan, you're up. So I think there could be two things. One is that Sharon, to your point, if it's absolutely clear that this is not, in fact, a Board of Ed item, the Board of Ed could say, we will delegate that to the appropriate person. Or voluntarily, if the superintendent or someone else who's attending who knows unequivocally that is in fact their arena, that they could potentially say, like, you know, I'll get to your point, David, I'll get back to you by such and such time. But the decision we have to make, first of all, is like, do we want to have that carve out of real time saying the board may respond or the administration may respond to let the public know, like, you know, whatever, we can get back, that is in a different arena than the Board of Ed.
I think we should. I think Sharon may feel otherwise. I think that there is nothing. Let's put the three of us or the five of us in a consumer role where you contact a company for customer service, and all you can do is leave a voicemail message, or you can do a chat with GPT, a robot who's not going to be responsive, and the robot says, at this point, you're asking for the president of the company. This is not, most people that show up at our meetings have, at least in their mind, exhausted options at lower levels. And that's why they've come to our meeting. And so as a consumer, I send an email to the president of Target or whatever the case may be, right? And the response I get back is, thank you, we'll look into this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, and I probably just typed 2 or 3 paragraphs of information. But if the email says, this sounds like an issue that needs to be addressed at the, you know, I had an issue at the Stanford Target store, right? And I get an email back from the president that says, you know, thank you for contacting us. This is an issue that should be handled by the general manager in Stanford or by my staff in Stanford. I have reached out to them and asked them to get in touch with you. I think I would feel much better. So I think to kind of split the middle, I 100% agree with what Dan and Sharon and Chad you're saying, which is, do we want to specifically call out, this is Patty's responsibility or Dan's responsibility or Phil's responsibility? Probably not. But if we have the ability at that meeting to identify it's not a Board of Ed issue, right? So I think the first parameter is it is not a Board of Ed issue. Why not at minimum, maybe we're saying this, at minimum have a Board of Ed member or the chair say to that parent, or Lisa, say to that parent, thank you, this is actually not a Board of Ed member, this is a building administration issue, this is a finance issue, this is a superintendent issue, and we will have the appropriate person get back to you.
I think what we're doing with that is we're opening up a can of worms. I think we need to keep our responses as simple as possible. I think we need to explain why we do not respond, and I think we need to keep our responses as simple as possible. The most I would say back to public comment is thank you so much. We appreciate, we hear what you're saying, and this isn't a board issue, so we will send it to the appropriate people to follow up with you. I think to say that is fine. If we go beyond that, we are opening a can of worms.
And the appropriate people are in the room, so I can see the fine line or the differentiator between calling out Dan DeVito by name. You know, my kid complains constantly their internet in their classroom is slow. That's Dan DeVito. And Dan's obviously on the spot.
Yeah,
versus
Dan is running out of that meeting as fast as he can.
right. Versus saying to that parent who might not know who Dan is. I mean, not, you know, saying to that parent, that's not a Board of Ed issue. That is an operations issue, or that is an administration issue. We will have the appropriate person follow up with you. In your scenario, Sharon, we given them nothing other than that.
No, I said to do that. I said if it's not a Board of Ed scenario, to say to them, thank you so much. We appreciate the feedback. We take feedback. This matter in particular is not a Board of Ed matter, so we will make sure that we forward it on to the correct person to take care of this for you, to respond to you. I think that is a completely fair response without opening up a can of worms. But if it's a board matter, our response needs to simply be, thank you so much for your feedback or for your comments.
Let's just back up. So just to Chad's point to close out, I think this is what we kind of chunk this into pieces. So is our recommendation at least going to be when people make public comment that is not a board issue?
Mhm.
Somebody, I mean, we have to define who that somebody is. Is that somebody Lisa? Is that somebody, I mean,
It's
Lisa or
Steve.
for
Steve is the
most part?
chair. Steve is the chair.
Right.
Steve conducts the meeting. So Steve is the one who responds then and says, thank you so much. You know, we appreciate, we value public feedback. That is not a Board of Ed issue. That falls within the administration. So we will forward it to the correct person to address. I think that that is
Right.
completely sufficient.
If Lisa were comfortable to say, that's not a board of issue, that's an administration issue, I will ensure it gets to the right person and they follow up with you. Big difference there between Steve, who's on the Board of Ed, who is an oversight board, then has to go to Lisa. So if Lisa were comfortable, I think it has more weight if Lisa said, this is an administration issue or not a Board of Ed issue. Jody, my assistant, will take your information down and we will follow up with you.
That's a conversation to be had with Lisa to see what, I can't speak to whether or not Lisa's going to be comfortable doing that.
Right, but we have to leave at this meeting at some point with some recommendations.
Mhm.
So I would feel more comfortable, and Chad, let me know what you think. If Lisa were willing to, and it's a different person. Steve is one step disconnected, right? Because Lisa's running the district. We're an oversight board. But if Lisa says to a parent, I understand, Jody, my assistant who's here, will take your information and the appropriate person will get back to you. We as a board, I get to hear and acknowledge that this has been moved from a board member's responsibility to Lisa.
So just to put some formality to this, it sounds like the process would be here that if we agree on this, we would be recommending that at our meetings, we adopt a couple practices. One, that we would say something at the beginning to let the public know what public comment is for and the purpose and protocol. Number two, if we decide we want to explore this carve out, that there will be one carve out within that, which is the Board of Ed may let you know if that falls under their purview or not. That might be one way in which we interact with the public. We'd have to actually, I guess, adopt that practice if we wanted to. And then a way around exactly the sort of question that you're both bringing up is I think the chair could say, like, that's not the Board of Ed purview. We will pass it along to the appropriate whoever, body, something. And then we, as an optional choice, I guess, ask the superintendent if the superintendent wants to, that they have the ability to chime in and say, essentially, like, that's a such and such issue, we'll come back to you. Like, that's the steps we have to go through, right? If we want to make this an adopted practice.
Yeah, those are the steps. I mean, but we'd have to put a document together that spells it all out and put it in the board agenda so that the board could see what we're talking about. Because the board's, whatever, our recommendations are going to come forward, and the board's going to have to vote on it. And they can,
Right.
if there are parts of it
Right.
that they don't like, then they say no, and they send us back to committee, and we come back to them again.
Right, and I don't think we're going to solve everything at one meeting, but I think just, I like to look at things in pieces. And I think that the first piece we look at right now is public comment that is not Board of Ed. The Board of Ed will not handle. If we focus on that, that is relatively easy. I think what we've gotten to at this point is, are we comfortable recommending to the general board that from a perspective of when people make public comment, if their public comment is not a matter that's going to be addressed by the Board of Ed, we let them know that in near real time. So you stand up, you speak about something such as an issue in the cafeteria. That's not a Board of Ed matter. So the first piece is and this is a question, it's not a statement. Our recommendation is when people make public comment and their public comment is not a Board of Ed matter, we let them know it is not a Board of Ed matter. The add-on to that is I think that we should ask Lisa, and this is part of the recommendation coming out of committee. We should ask Lisa if she would be comfortable, because again, we're not talking about 50 people that come to public comment. We're talking about, would Lisa be comfortable making that general statement? Because if we as a board say it's not our responsibility or fall under our purview, but the person who we would give it to is Lisa, and Lisa's in the room already, I think I think it'll be better received by that parent when that parent hears not Steve say it's not something the Board of Ed is responsible for or has authority over. We're going to bring it to the right person. Well, we know who we're going to bring it to. We're going to bring it to Lisa. Not even Steve. So do we ask Lisa if she would be comfortable not saying, well, that guy right there, Dan DeVito, is responsible for slow internet, but rather Lisa would say to that parent, thank you. That's actually not a Board of Ed issue. Again, Jody will take your information, or Jody has your information, and we'll get back to you. I think if Lisa was comfortable saying it, it provides, a parent would appreciate hearing Lisa say, I'm on it, I'll get it to the right person, rather than have Steve say, not our responsibility, we'll send it to the right person.
I think that we're splitting hairs, to be honest with you. I don't think that Lisa's ever been a shrinking violet, but I think we're kind of splitting hairs on this one. And also keep in mind, in order to make public comment, you have to stand up, you have to say your name, and you have to give your address. So we've got their information at that stage. But I just think that, if you want to make a recommendation for it, I just think it's splitting hairs. Lisa frequently will say, we're on this. We'll follow up with you. She's not a shrinking violet.
No, what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a process that we as a committee are going to go to the general board and say, this is what we're thinking. So
I don't necessarily know if I agree that we need to formalize whether or not the superintendent speaks up, I guess is what I'm trying to say. To me, it's splitting hairs. As a parent, if I hear the chairman of the Board of Ed say something, it carries, as much weight with it as the superintendent of the schools.
Okay, I disagree. So
Okay.
Chad, what do you think?
The main thing that I think within this is that I don't think we should say, Lisa, you can handle these, but I think we should, if we want to carve out that it's an optional thing that the superintendent could chime in. And the question would be, do we need to memorialize that in language so the public knows? Meaning, do you have a sentence that says something like, one exception is that if a matter brought to our attention is not in the purview of the Board of Ed chair may let the person know, and or if appropriate, the superintendent may, whatever. I don't know, because part of what since we can't really comment in public comment, the one area we do have that can help the public feel heard is letting them know, presetting the expectations in advance of what's going to happen, which is essentially in this meeting, nothing real time. So to your point, I think we should make it optional for Lisa, but I think we should bring it to her attention. Is that a point of protocol that she could chime in and say things? And then if so, do we want to put a sentence within this that alerts the public about that? I kind of feel like the more that we can give the public some guidance about this, the better, because I think it will be better received, because they'll know why they're not getting any kind of immediate real-time response. So my suggestion would be that we share with a larger board, this is the language we're proposing saying at the beginning. This is the protocol that we're suggesting, which is we don't respond in public comment, save one situation, which is if it's very clear that it's not the Board of Ed's purview, that the chair will say so, but will not throw someone under the bus necessarily real time. That's could be inaccurate, first of all, but second of all, the person might not be prepared. And then the third thing would be that we put to Lisa that we as a board think it's appropriate optionally, if she wants to jump in real time and direct to the audience's attention who or what category of decision making might come back to them, meaning what the sector or area might come back to them.
It could be an and/or.
Mm-hmm.
The statement could be it.
That's-
The statement could be it.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable compromise. And I think what we're doing here is we're kind of hashing out the different pieces, and we're ultimately going to make a recommendation to the board, and it's going to get hashed out further at the board. And Steve may say, Steve or Lisa may have different feelings and kick it back to us. So I think from the first piece, not Board of Ed matters, I think we sort of have and by the way, I agree 100%, we should have this document, something read ahead of time, just so people know. And the intent is for them to understand our process. It's not intended to tell them what they can't do. It's more for them to understand what our processes are. So I think the first piece is we've sort of hashed out at this point. If it's not a Board of Ed issue, Steve or Lisa will in essentially real time let the parent know or the community member know it's not a Board of Ed issue. If Steve is going to speak to it, then Steve presumably will say, we will get this to the right person. If Lisa is willing to speak to it, then Lisa can say the same thing. But ultimately, I think the real takeaway, if I understand correctly, is for non-Board of Ed matters, we will, in near real time, person speaks, we will let them know it's not a board. At minimum, it's not. The chair will let them know it's not a Board of Ed matter, and potentially Lisa or Steve will go so far as to say it's not a Board of Ed matter. It is a building matter, or it is an administration matter, or whatever, and somebody will follow up with you. So either which way, we've acknowledged the public comment, and we've told them what they can expect to happen next. Is that a fair?
I'm comfortable with that, except for one big caveat, which is that I do not think the chair nor Lisa should be obligated to do that consistently. And one of the biggest reasons is that I wouldn't know. If I were Steve, I would not know every single matter, whether it was in fact in Board of Ed purview or not. So I think this can be an optional thing, meaning if the chair is certain this is not under Board of Ed purview, or if Lisa is certain where this would sit, that they have the option to do so, and we let the public know about that, but it's by no means mandatory for every comment. It is with that caveat, then I'm on board with that. Sharon, what do you think?
Yeah.
You know what? I'm looking up right now. Oops. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm actually looking up right now in the Board of Ed policies to see what our actual policy is around public comment. Have any of you guys done that yet?
I've read it a couple of times, but I've read it specifically with an eye for who can make public comment and the time limits. I've not looked at it from a like what we're discussing, responsibility to respond or not.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is before we try to make the changes and before we try to put something forward, should we reference the policy that we have around public comment and the board's responses to public comment? Because in order for us to, if it's already laid out in policy, we're going to have to change policy on it before we can do anything.
Yeah, if you have the public policy handy, I've read it a couple of times. I've never seen anything in there about what we're talking about, such as we cannot respond as a board, or the superintendent or the chair should or should not respond. But if you have it handy.
Solve. I'm not seeing anything in public comments yet. I see public complaints, which is interesting.
I can give you the policy numbers and the links. I have them. It's policy. So there. Let me see if I can put this in the chat. But give me a moment.
I do have to go at the hour mark, folks. I don't know if others have a hard stop as well, but I do have to go.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I have a hard
All right.
at 10 o'clock as well.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So it looks like this is going to be a TBC.
One tiny action item is that, Dan, I'm going to send another revised draft because it's in an email anyway. I'm going to basically lop off the first paragraph of this. I don't think it's right. It needs to be shorter anyway. And I may add one example sentence of what we could say if we determine we want to give a carve out about basically responding real time at whether it's Board of Ed purview or not. And then at least we have that document people can look at. Because I'm not comfortable this being the one on record, because I think based on people's reaction to it, I think we should change it anyway a little bit. Is that okay if I email that to you, Dan?
Well, this is
Yeah.
going to be part of the record anyway because it was part of the
Yeah,
Zoom, so
no,
people can see
For
this.
sure, but I don't want someone to watch this and think like, oh, I think this is very much a document that needs revision and multiple revisions if we even determine to adopt it or not. So that's why I'm wondering if I can make a second revision of this.
Yeah, I'll double check, but do the revision, send it over to me. June will post it as part of a note for the agenda when she does the minutes.
Okay.
And I think we should be okay, but I will have to check in to make sure that that's allowed.
Okay.
All right, so I think to wrap up in the last couple of minutes, so
Yeah.
I think let me just kind of, next time we meet, Sharon will come with the actual policy.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, the current policy about public comment. What we've left with today is sort of one of the reasons we were meeting today was we knew this was going to take multiple meetings at the committee level before we could present anything to the board. So today, I think that the progress we've made really surrounds, absent of Sharon coming to the next meeting, and because the policy that you're going to send is already a public document, maybe Sharon, as soon as you get your hands on it, just forward it to Chad and I, so we have it.
Sure.
There's no issue there. So
Dan wants it too, I'm sure.
yeah, so Sharon will forward the policy to us. Absent of the policy saying, and I read the policy, and I don't have it memorized, but I read it. Absent the policy saying the Board of Ed does not respond to public comment. Absent of it saying that or some language similar to that, it sounds like what we've decided today is for matters that are not handled by the Board of Ed, if the chair or the superintendent felt comfortable letting that community member know who handles that, they will, at the time of the public comment, let that community member know it is not a Board of Ed issue. It's a building issue. It's a finance issue. It's a whatever issue. I think that's about as far as we got today. Does that sort of overall sum it up?
Yeah.
Yep.
That sums it up. Now we need to get to what they
Okay.
actually say prior to the public comment. And that I think goes to the revision that you're going to be sending. And maybe we should each take a swipe that we can bring to the next meeting as well, based on what Chad is submitting.
Sounds.
Yeah, and I think the next meeting, really, the draft that you bring up. So
Can I
you
send
I
that
would
to
say,
everybody, by the
work
way?
on-
Can I send that to the full communications committee, the revision, or not?
We are the full communications committee.
No, but
Yeah.
can I email to everybody?
Yeah.
Oh,
one
Yeah, I
email,
think
or
we're
does
just
that?
going with that. Yeah.
If
Yes.
you do it, you have to say this is just for reading only. Please do not respond so it doesn't turn into a meeting.
Right.
All right, cool. Okay,
Right. That's where it comes down. That's the weird thing, right?
I got it. Everybody. I'll see you later. Bye.
All right.
Bye, guys. Oh, hold on.
All right. So we'll have to wait. Don't go, Jared. We have to formally end the meeting.
That's what I was just going to say. I moved that we end the
Otherwise,
meeting.
I'm coming to your house and we'll continue the meeting there.
Oh, no.
All right. So it's 10 a.m. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
There we go. Done.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.